Hello everyone, Kirby1 here, and welcome to Dominions 5. Dominions 5 is a game that needs no introduction, on my channel at least, since it's the only thing that I play. Well, I play other games, but it's the only thing that I've made videos for. And so, I feel like with Dominions 6 right around the corner, I'd give the old game a nice send-off and reminisce about a couple of the good old times that we've had. Um, when people like to say there's a certain game that they've been playing or reminds them of their childhood, that is like Dominions 5 for me, except Dominions 5 was my adulthood. I played about, on Steam it says 4,000 or so hours of this game, and that's just online versions because you can play this game offline as well and rack up the hours. But I don't say this as a metric against which I want to measure anyone else against, but just as an indicator of how much time I've put into this game as sort of a comparative. EU4 would be my next top game on Steam, and I've only played about 1,000 hours of that. So as soon as I got into Dominions 5 full time, it really became like the thing that I spent a lot of my time doing. Let's get into what Dominions 5 is. Dominions 5 is, well, a lot of people will say that it's a grand strategy or it's a strategy game. Really, when it comes down to it, Dominions 5 is a bit of a auto battler, really. It allows you to do some level of scripting and some level of planning what your moves are going to be. But at the end of the day, once you click end turn and go to the next turn, or once you wait for the turn to be processed from all the other multiplayer people, you are really just watching the results of what has happened. And it's a little bit hands-off in that regard compared to things like Total War or other real-time strategy games or even other turn-based strategy games where your direct actions are going to show you what's going to happen as a result of the battle. A lot of things like that would be Civilization, where even if you just hover over where you're going to go, there's a little bit of randomization, but it'll still pretty much tell you what the result is going to be. With Dominions, you really just have to sort of get a feel for what your actions are going to likely result in. You have to do a little bit of estimation based on your knowledge of the game, and if you are really into it, you can also do a lot of testing, things like expansion testing, things like testing specific battles. You can set up the likely variables of what is going to happen. And because of that, intelligence in terms of exact composition of an enemy's forces, exact placement of the scripting of an enemy is very important in terms of being able to determine how you're going to react to where a player's position is and what your response to that is going to be and whether it will be effective or not. So it's, like I say, an auto battler, but it's a much more in-depth auto battler than you would sort of normally expect from a game that you would describe as an auto battler. As far as the theme goes, this is something that really draws a lot of people into the Dominion series. The theme of the game is a fantasy genre, but it's really specifically focuses a lot on real-world mythology, real-world nations, and their history and their lore in terms of religion and in terms of religious mythology. Things like Christian mythology in the case of nations like Ermor and their respective lines, which is the Roman equivalent. Things like Jewish mythology in terms of the Hinnom line. Things like Arabic mythology, which is actually a pretty recent addition in the case of the Ubar line, which is what I'm playing right now. And et cetera, all down the line. And because the developers of the game are Illwinter and they're a Swedish company, there's a lot of focus on Norse mythology and things like Jotun giant nations or Vanir elves, which, well, we call elves in the Dominions community, but are really just glamored mages with illusions and things like that. And that's something you're going to see expanded upon a lot more in Dominion 6. So the mythology element of the fantasy genre that Dominions has pulled from is a bit more unique for a lot of players. And a lot of the history buffs, like I was saying, having played and gotten into Europa Universalis, Crusader Kings, all the other Paradox games, for example, it tends to attract that kind of history buffs crowd, that mythology lovers crowd, people who really enjoy something new that is brought to the fantasy genre in general, rather than just your generic elves and dwarves and orcs and things like that. It ties the game much more directly into a real world setting that you can sort of envision yourself playing as. Speaking of playing as, you are playing as a god, a pretender god. And your sort of embodiment as a physical form is represented at the beginning of the game by the pretender and the various magical powers and manifestations of your dominion in terms of what are called scales in the game, as to how your presence affects the world and how your presence in the world leads this particular nation that you've chosen to select as the people that you are bringing along with you in godhood, ascension to godhood. The way that you win the game typically is represented by claiming Thrones of Ascension, which are the in-game sort of win mechanic. And each throne grants a certain number of ascension points, and once you have met the predetermined threshold of ascension points by capturing the throne provinces, claiming the thrones in those provinces with either your pretender chassis or various prophets or other holy threes that you can recruit in some nations, then and then you manage to defend them from attack from other players, then you win the game. And so that's sort of the actual win game mechanic. But the way that you get there is typically through attacking the other players, invading their provinces, claiming territories and searching for magic sites, getting gold tax income, all sorts of things. The general sort of like 4x expand, exploit kind of exterminate kind of thing. So once you crack open your first game of Dominions, if you have no prior experience to this particular series of games, then it can look a little bit daunting at first glance. Some of the things that are a little bit hard for new players to overcome are the user interface, the sort of much more slow and blocky and unintuitive commands that you need to use in order to navigate the game. Another thing that can be a bit of a hurdle for players is the sheer amount of content. Once you get into every single one of the provinces and what they're capable of recruiting, and once you get into every single magic spell, all of a unit's stat cards, all of their abilities, which can vary drastically, all sorts of niche mechanics and different things. And once you try your hand at a few attempts of expansion with armies and sometimes predictably fail, sometimes figure it out, but you don't know how it worked, it can take a while for people to really just sort of get comfortable with how to start playing the game. This kind of game has a bit of a learning curve, a pretty steep learning curve along the lines of similar, very popular, but very steep learning curve games like Dwarf Fortress, or I mean, even what I was talking about earlier, EU4, Crusader Kings, etc., can be a little bit daunting to sort of try and parse your way through, but without getting into it with some help. And the way that I personally got into this particular game as well was by watching other people play it on YouTube. Amusingly, one of the sort of ways that I sort of get hooked on a new game is that I will be watching some people play a game and learn the mechanics of the game. And once I figure out how the actual mechanics work and I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, well, I mean, I could totally do this thing better than that person who's doing it on YouTube is doing it. And then I try my hand at it and face plant and fail even harder than they did, which is really funny experience for me. But anyways, uh, it's been a lot of fun sort of learning this game and just over time absorbing so much information on how the mechanics work, how the sort of interlocking systems fit together. And I think that's what really has kept a lot of people playing as well, as long as I have. Like I mentioned, I have a couple thousand hours of runtime, but that pales in comparison to a lot of other people that I know who have played more than that even than I have. And it's just been people wanting to learn more, wanting to practice the game more, wanting to pull up a game turn. And even if they're in like 6 multiplayer games and they're waiting for someone else to do their turn, they just want to keep playing the game and practice all sorts of different mechanics. As far as another thing relating to just the sheer amount of content goes, we have almost 100 nations, 100 different nations in Dominions 5, and when Dominion 6 comes out, it'll be over 100 different nations. And I say different, there are a lot of nations that are sort of like a line of nations that are very similar and share similar histories and have various interactions culturally and historically with each other. But each one of those even is distinct in its own different way. Some of them will have completely varied mechanics, like when you talk about early age Airmore and middle age Airmore, people who know the game are like, well, those are not even related to each other at all. One is a regular sort of human Roman nation, and the other is a complete pop kill with everybody is undead. So we're talking about vast variations between different nations. And again, that can be quite a stumbling block for players who are like, I don't know where to start. There's just too many options. I think for getting into a game like this from just scratch, one of the fun things to do is just sort of read the descriptions. You don't necessarily have to pick a nation that is considered the best or the meta or anything like that. And just try something out that you think sounds fun or feels a lot of fun to you. One of my favorite nations is Asphodel, which, as anybody who's been in the game for a while knows, in Dominions 5 is considered to be the premier worst nation of the game. But I've played a lot of games with Asphodel, and every single time, even if I didn't win, I had a lot of fun with them just because of the theme of it, the engagement of the nation as far as playing like you're this wrathful, vengeful forest that's out to just absorb everyone and have them dance around for you as vine puppets. It's a lot of fun. Just the theme of it, even if you're not necessarily going to win the game, you can have a lot of fun in all sorts of different ways just from engaging with the various mechanics and the story of it. So I think after you get into the game of Dominions, after a couple of times you're playing single player and you start to really get a feel for one of the major limitations of the game. This game is really not designed around being a single player experience. I think that's not necessarily intentional by the developers of Illwinter, but because it's a bit of a small team, just 2, maybe 3 guys, I think, in their development team, and their focus and knowledge base is not specifically in how AI programs will interact with each other in terms of engaging the player. Their focus is more on the story of generating the nations and creating the sprites, if you will, for the content of the game. Once you've gotten into the game a little bit, you start sort of feeling like you've gamed the system. Once you understand all the mechanics and you know how the AI is going to react to your different moves and things like that, it starts to feel maybe like a little bit of a stale experience. At least I'll say that from my own personal experience. That's not to say that there aren't people who are part of a single player community. They're sort of like a bit of the probably silent majority because they won't make as much content as multiplayer players will. And I won't say that there isn't any content, because if you go looking for it, you can certainly find people playing Dominions 5 with the single player experience. And so there are things out there for people to find. But when you really get into the community of the rest of the people who enjoy playing Dominions and playing Dominions multiplayer, that's where the game really shines. Because once you replace all of the other players that you're interacting with in the game with other human beings, you really start to be able to play with the mechanics of the game on a whole nother level. You're playing with these mechanics that are really intriguing, really interesting, and a lot of fun to play with and interact with. And you're throwing them against other people who also have some understanding of how those mechanics work and are doing all sorts of interesting and different things that you wouldn't expect, things that you can't necessarily plan for. And you're also able to talk with people. You're able to negotiate, be like, we can have a shared border here. We don't have to fight right now. You can do all sorts of things like backstabbing people, massive betrayals, completely taking their entire country in one fell swoop, called like elfing in the community. And you can also just go through with a bunch of friends and say, look, you're a cool dude from my other experiences playing with you in different games. We don't have to attack each other at all. We can trade with each other. We can do all sorts of things. We can exchange gems and items and stuff like that. You can have honorable personal combats. You say, hey, everyone, just stay out of it. I want to kill this one guy. It's just him and me, one-on-one. We're going to duke it out. Really, a lot of fun can be had with interacting and marrying those fun game mechanics with cool people and a lot of fun ways that you can interact with other players in that way. And that, for me personally, has really been what has brought this game out of its shell of just being another single player Civilization-esque, Total War-esque kind of game, and bringing it into that game that I have spent thousands of hours playing, and wanting to have 6 games running at the same time, wanting to have that next turn of every single one of these games, and just keep going over and over and over again. It's been a lot of fun becoming part of this community, sharing this experience with a lot of people, and we're all looking forward to Dominion 6 coming out together. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, sort of, well, to be honest, having to sort of break down my previously learned knowledge, and in order to realize all of the massive changes that are going to be happening in Dominion 6, the things that I thought would work in Dominions 5 are not going to work anymore. The things that I knew are going to have to be unlearned in order to figure out how this new mechanic is going to work itself out. Learning completely new things that have never been in the game before, playing new nations, all of this stuff is going to be a fun ride, and I'm hoping to be able to do a little bit of that on YouTube here to share with other people. Maybe if we're lucky, we can get some more new blood into the game and bring other people into this kind of amazing experience that Dominions has been. So I'm going to pivot now and maybe hope that this transition isn't going to be too jarring for people watching the video. But we're going to have a little bit of a fun sort of send off to Dominions where I'm going to play one of the last turns of multiplayer live for you guys here in the game. And it's not going to be particularly fun. I'm probably just going to get wiped here unless he's just pinging the fort. No, well, there's a little bit here. Yep, there's a howl, so I think we might not last too long. Body Ethereal is doing work for me, though. And I made it. All right, awesome. So we managed to survive one more turn. So not quite the end of the game for me, but we'll be getting there. I think one or two more. Oh my goodness. All right, well, we're going to watch this one too, just because it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a lot of skellies. And then Nazca. Let's see what we've got going on. Okay, there's a couple earthquakes. Did he get mass flight off? I think he did. So, there's that. Relief, divine channeling, light, relief on both sides. Oof. There's some heavy hitting earth. Meteors. Darkness, rigor. Well, rigor isn't going to do much for these guys, but what you going to do? He's getting some of these guys. If I had to guess, it's probably dust to dust, solar rays. Okay. What has he got for his bless? Just unholy weapons. Yeah, this has been a scales build, Nazca. Looks like he just burned through the chaff, unfortunately for him. Yeah. Well, that was rough. But I think Scalaria is basically on its way out. I've just been watching a little bit of what's going on. This all used to be my lands, and I'm basically dead now, so... fort's still cracked. Let's see, I could probably do... some more ogres now. Oh, I don't have the gems. I can get the gems. I totally forgot how much ogres was. There we go. And I think we want at least 3 more earth gems. Well, I got the death gems for it. Only got 1 air gem. Alright, that should do it. Probably die now, but I can at least get some bodyguards on these guys now. And I don't really want the Yetis to do that because they have cold auras. But yeah, so this should be fine. Alright. Well, anyways, that's been fun. Peace out for Dominions 5. I wanted to say that with the new year and everything like that, I thought I'd try my hand at something like New Year's resolution of a sort, where I'm going to try and see if I can get back to something like at least 1 Dominions video a week. And I know that I have a tendency to sort of do that thing where I just sort of bail on the New Year's resolutions about 2 weeks in. But I think one of the things that might keep me going is the excitement for Dominion 6 coming out. We've already got scheduled a YouTubers Blitz that I've been invited to for Saturday, January 20th. So mark your calendars for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully people will bounce around and be able to see how the games are going for people. It'll be, I think we're aiming for just about 2 hours, so not too long, but maybe I'll have gotten a little bit of time practicing the game and not completely suck at it. But we'll see. Maybe I'll also try and do like a first impressions video. And then from there, I don't really know. I have a couple of ideas, but I thought something like the general nation overviews kind of thing. Just some sort of beginner. I wanted to get into some beginner strategy guides for complete newbies to get more people into the community, and we'll just see what people are receptive to. Again, my channel is not really intended to be like monetized or anything like that. I just do this for fun when I have time, and I enjoy people coming along the ride with me. And I hope to see everyone in this new year with Dominion 6, and we'll all learn and enjoy the game together. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.